G'day legends, in this video we're going to be talking about what will the UFC look like in 10 years time, projected into the future using the power of our imaginations. This video's topic comes from one of the channel's subscribers, Soul Saver. He left it in a comments section. If you want to have any videos discussed or any MMA topics discussed, drop it in the comments of this video. So thank you, Soul Saver, for the dono, and thank you for the comment as well. Let's get right into it. In the future, in 10 years time, the landscape of MMA is obviously going to have progressed quite a bit. One of the biggest changes that will happen to our sport is that Dana White will be gone. Now, that is a massive change. Dana White has steered the UFC ship ever since financial bankruptcy, all the way in the early noughties to where it is today as a global phenomenon. And I do believe that Hunter Campbell is going to be taking up his position as the head of the UFC, directed from the boardroom of the owners of the TKO group. With Hunter Campbell in place, the UFC will become an even more corporate organization. Why do I believe this? Number one, look at the UFC documentary that was put out by Roku. You can see the PR team freaking out over everything that Sean Strickland says. That just shows me the mentality that happens behind the closed doors of the UFC. Plus, there are already more and more progressive values being sprinkled into the UFC as they are today. We already have the rainbow-colored names on the shorts during Pride Month. We also have even more WMMA main events getting pushed in front of us constantly. So already with Dana White at the helm, there is already progressivism being sprinkled into the UFC, and I do believe that's just going to continue into the future once Dana White is gone. So that is the vibe of the sport. The next thing that's going to happen is we're actually going to be seeing even more fight nights down at the UFC Apex. I do believe the UFC Apex is going to go under pretty significant renovations, not just this stage that's happening now, but they will continue to happen as the UFC finds that they are saving money by putting on events at the Apex. You'll almost see like the B leagues of the UFC fight night cards happening at the Apex more and more as that becomes a bigger crowded arena. It just makes sense for the UFC to do their fights there in-house where they don't have to pay stadium fees. However, having said that, I do also think that the UFC are going to continue to invest money in their PI facilities around the world. And with that, we're going to see the continuation of the skill level in MMA grow and grow and grow. Already the skill set has grown so much over the last 20 years, and I think it's going to more than double. The skill level that we're seeing now it's going to more than double in the next 10 years. When you're looking at 10 years into the future, we have 16-year-olds right now that believe that they are going to be professional MMA fighters. That was never an option before in the numbers that we're seeing it now. So those 16-year-olds are going to be entering the UFC around 25. That crop of Raul Rosas Juniors, except they're just going to have an even bigger skill level. So I think that is going to be awesome to see. However, with the legacy being more remembered now, we have more fans now than ever. And the Tito Ortiz's and the Chuck Liddells, there's sort of a distant memory of back when this was a niche sport with a very small fan base. However, now the fan base is massive. So legacy is going to grow and grow over time as more and more people remember your name. And as that becomes more prevalent in the sport, we are going to see a heightened fighter IQ. We are not going to have fighters like Yuri Prohaska just wading towards Alexander Pereira with their chin in the air after they were just knocked down at the end of the first round. We are going to start to see fighters protect their legacy even more. I do believe as well that the Tough series, the Tough reality TV show, it's going to be dead. That show is 100% going to die. They're going to stop throwing money at that show, but I think the Contender series will step up and be all year long. There might be a chance of seeing one episode of the Contender series a month all year long. It will become a much bigger feeding, competition for the UFC. I think the pay-per-view price is going to drop down and become cheaper as streaming services will cover the cost. Plus, the cities are going to be hosting UFC events. The sport is sort of going to run like F1 or the Soccer World Cup, where cities are going to pay for the UFC to come and bring their events to them. Now, that is already happening around the world. Here in Australia, one of our cities, Perth, has a deal with the UFC to come and put on events there. So does Sydney, so does Saudi Arabia, so does London. There are cities around the world that will pay the UFC to come to them. And that is the way that the F1 works. That is the way the Soccer World Cup works. That is the way tennis opens work. And I think that is the direction that the UFC is looking to go in. That's going to bring down the price of pay-per-view. So you will pay a streaming service like Netflix or like ESPN Plus to watch the regular fight nights, but with the cost being covered by the cities, you'll see that pay-per-views drop down to a far more manageable price as a addition onto your streaming service. But I hear you say, Dougie, the UFC will never drop the prices of anything. There'll be another pay-per-view price. There'll be an extra pay-per-view price. This one will be even more expensive. This one is going to be your pay-per-view option for cage-side VR experience. This is something that the UFC have been looking at with Facebook or Meta or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if you guys remember that time that Dana White told all the reporters that it was absolutely ridiculous that the UFC Apex was going to close down so Mark Zuckerberg could have his own private event, and then the very next day closed down the Apex so Mark Zuckerberg could have his own private event. But the reason that happened is because they were testing out what it would look like to have a full-on VR experience cage side. And I think they run those now on Meta. I'm not sure. I don't really give a shit about VR, nor do I give a shit about Facebook or Meta. But if that is a thing and that does continue to grow into the future, I can picture having pay-per-views where if you have a Samsung Galaxy VR headset at home, you can buy a cage side point of view experience raised up in the dais looking down at the cage. And I do think that's where they are going to try and cover the cost of their pay-per-view prices. What else is going to be happening 10 years into the future? Conor McGregor will be remembered as an absolute clown. He will go down getting drunk and fighting bare knuckle fights in his own promotion against absolute cans. And Michael Chandler's career will be Conor McGregor's bitch, the man that let his career slip away so Conor could go and get pissed on the sidelines. John Jones is going to go down as the fake Michael Jordan, Muhammad Ali of MMA. And it's going to be a great litmus test to MMA fans who want to know which one of you is the casual, which one of you just got here, which one of you really remember your MMA history, as John Jones is going to be ours, the fan base's casual check in the future. The judging will still be absolutely cooked. The UFC like it that way. The UFC absolutely love the way the judging is done now. Notice how whenever there's a weird scorecard, it seems to go in the UFC's favor. Yeah. Fighter pay is going to stagnate. It is going to stagnate until local teams or national teams like the Socceroos or a football's premier or a country's premier soccer team get sponsorship from their local governments, or until super gyms learn, like AKA, learn how to make a profit or learn how to merchandise or put on their own local shows, fees for lower fighters, or government grants like you have now with tennis stars in local cities, or membership deals where if you join up as part of CKB as a member, you get cheaper ticket prices to UFC or to local MMA events. That is the way that the funding for UFC fighters is going to need to come up. Without any real competition coming forward, the UFC have no reason to pay their fighters more. And with the PFL already failing financially with just unlimited money from the Saudis, I don't see any organization being able to compete with the UFC in the next 10 years. So once these gyms start learning how to make money, they will be able to pay their own fighters. Again, you've got to picture it kind of like how F1 teams do. Maybe in the future, clubs like AKA or CKB will change their team names to Team Red Bull, or that Red Bull will sponsor an entire gym across the world. You know, maybe it'll be like Red Bull New Zealand, Red Bull North America, that kind of thing. And athletes will be sponsored that way and go out and do promotional work for companies that way. Eventually, the PFL is going to die up once the Saudi money just disappears. And then finally, one of the biggest changes around the world is with this sport getting bigger and bigger and so many more people training MMA and getting into MMA and going to local MMA gyms, there's just going to be overall world peace. overall world peace as more and more blokes around the world train MMA, train arm bars, train rear naked chokes, train kickboxing as it becomes bigger and bigger, where everyone is forced. It's going to be like one of those cultures around the world where everyone is carrying a gun, so no one messes around because you don't know who has a gun. When everyone has got a sick Kimura or a head kick in their back pocket, no one's gonna want to fuck around to find out. It's gonna be, MMA is gonna usher in world peace. So that is it. That is my projection 10 years into the future of what the landscape of MMA and the UFC is gonna look like. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and hit that like button to help this blow up and go out to new audiences. If you have a topic that you want to get me to cover, just put it down there in the comments. I read every single comment on every single video. So even if you don't think of it today, you maybe think of it tomorrow or in a week's time, just drop a comment on any video and I'll see it. But until then, you guys have a great day and I'll see you all in the next video.